So, when you don't know how to do something, how to fix something, or how something works, what do? Ask a teacher? Ask your parents? Ask your friends? Ask someone you really know and trust? No! You go to the internet and ask some randos. But I'm not talking about creeps here, I hope. No, I mean the people of the internet! You know, those people who make how-to videos. Because chances are, if you're trying to figure out something, someone on the internet has already figured it out for you. Things like, how do I unsend a text? No. How do I do a winged eyeliner? How do I get rid of the zit by Friday night? How do I get out of gym class? How do I screen cap Snapchat without getting caught? They'll never know. But then there are things in life that don't have an easy fix, that don't have a simple solution, that don't have a how-to video. Things like what to do when you have problems with family, or when it seems like you have no control in your life, or what to do when someone has done something to you. I mean, clearly, they gotta go. The truth is, there's a lot of life that doesn't have a solution you can just find online. So how do you know what to do when you don't know what to do?
I don't know if any of you follow any meme or comedy accounts on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube, but whenever I stumble on something on my feed that isn't quite funny enough to make me laugh out loud, but it's good enough to get a response out of me, I find myself either verbally saying, like out loud to my phone, depending on who else I'm around, or commenting on the post the word oof. I've come to use the word oof as a placeholder word. It works in so many different settings. It's so versatile. It works when you find out something really embarrassing that happened to one of your friends and your response is just, oof, that's rough. It works when you see a total fail video and you can't help but just say, oof. It also works when you see something so relatable and you can only say, oof, I felt that. Urban Dictionary actually defines the word oof as a word you say when you don't know what to say. I say it a lot, so I guess that means I don't know what to say a lot, but I know that there are definitely times where oof just doesn't cut it. And I'd say that right now is one of those times. I mean, we are doing a series on what to do when you don't know what to do, and when you don't know what to say, you can say oof and just keep going. But it doesn't work for right now. It doesn't work when you read a new article or you are watching the news and you see that the number of coronavirus cases is on the rise in your area. It doesn't work when you have no idea how much longer you're going to be in stay-at-home orders. It doesn't work when your school year was canceled. Proms, dances, graduation ceremonies, spring sports seasons over before they even started. Yeah, oof just doesn't cut it. There are times where we need a more serious response. And there are times when we just don't even have a response. And it can feel like there are no words for what we're going through at all. And in those times when I don't know how to handle it, I can either be impressed by how well I am able to respond, or I'm surprised with how poorly I respond because I wasn't anticipating how much it was going to affect me. And just like how we might not know how to respond, I think that when we get shaken up by our circumstances, we can end up in one of two boats when it comes to our relationship with God. One of those boats is when we actually feel closer to God and we can see him at work in the midst of everything we're going through. And that's a great boat to be in. The other boat is when we're really confused and we just can't see where God is. We see everything that's going on and we don't understand how he could be a part of that. And I think that's the boat that a lot of us might be in right now, and that's okay. No matter where you're at in those boats, no matter how deeply you've been affected by the coronavirus, I think we could all say that we're trying to figure out what to do next. Because we so badly want an answer to that question of what to do when we don't know what to do. This week, we're going to continue looking at the story of the life of Joseph. Last week, Tony started us off by sharing with us about Joseph and his family. Now, Joseph had some pretty rough and tough brothers, and if you know this story, I think you'd agree that even though we know they didn't say oof in biblical times, that Joseph knew he needed a more serious response, or maybe he just knew he didn't know how to respond. But oof was not his response, and we're going to figure out what his response was in just a couple of minutes. But in order to get there, I'd like for you to join me in Genesis chapter 37, and we're going to pick back up in this story in verse 18. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Now they in this story is Joseph's brothers, and he is Joseph. And yes, you heard me correctly, Joseph's brothers were plotting to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. You see, Joseph had just had a dream that he was going to be the greatest of all of his brothers, and they really didn't want that dream to come true. Now Reuben, the youngest of them, when he heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben was trying to take back some control of the situation, and I can bet he really didn't know how to do that. But what he also didn't know was that his brothers were willing to do whatever it took to make sure that Joseph's dream did not come true. So they decided to throw him in the well and take his coat, take it back to their father, drench it in animal blood to convince him that Joseph had died. And to make things worse, they sold him into slavery just to get him out of their hair. Now, I've had some pretty oof-worthy moments in my life, but I can say that this definitely is way more serious than just saying oof and keep on going. But I mean, there is some good news for Joseph because he's not dead after all. He's just been sold into slavery. You know, no big deal. He's just lost complete control over the rest of his life. But there's something special about Joseph. There's something that sets Joseph apart. And we learn what that is in just a few chapters later. Scripture tells us that the Lord was with Joseph. And that this is what sets Joseph apart because he was able to succeed in everything that he did in life because of God's presence with him. God was with Joseph. Joseph had lost complete control of his life, but God's presence had changed the trajectory of his life. He was able to succeed as an Egyptian slave. He was able to succeed in prison. He was able to get out of prison, work up the ranks, and eventually become the ruler of Egypt. Now, God's presence in Joseph's life, it didn't change any of Joseph's immediate circumstances, but it proved that he wasn't alone in the midst of everything going on. It didn't give Joseph a map to his life, but it gave him a perspective to know that he wasn't the one in control of his life. It didn't make it easy for Joseph to figure out everything that had happened to him, but it made it easier because he knew that he didn't have to be the one to figure it out all on his own. When there's nothing you can do, God is with you. And I know this might sound like some Pinterest quote cliche, but it's true because it doesn't come from Pinterest. It actually comes from God's word. We see in Psalm 18:6, David declare, I know the Lord is always with me. I will not be shaken, for he is right beside me. Jesus says to his disciples, and be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. And as believers today, we can rejoice in knowing that God is always with us. We just celebrated this with Easter just a couple weeks ago. And we can continue to celebrate God's presence with us every day in our lives. Because when we know that God is with us, the uncertainty of life doesn't get the last word anymore. Coronavirus doesn't get the last word. We don't even get the last word. God gets the last word. And in his word, we are reminded over and over and over again of God's presence with us. The prophet Isaiah reminds us so beautifully in chapter 43, verse 2. And he says, when you go through deep waters, I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned up. The flames will not consume you. Knowing this truth and knowing that God is with us doesn't change our circumstances. And for some of us, we might never see a change in some of the things we're going through in life. But if we let it, Knowing this truth might just change us, and it might just change how we respond to things, even when we don't know what to do. So what is that response? What do you do when you don't know what to do? Well, it starts with being real. You might think that you can fool your friends. Honestly, it's pretty easy right now with social distancing. You might even think that you can fool your family. You might be trying to fool yourself right now and tell yourself that you have it all under control and you're fine. You're really not being affected that much. But you can't fool God. So what's the point in doing any of that? Be real with yourself, with those around you. Be honest about what you're going through. And be willing to admit that you might not know what to do right now. And that's okay. And this next part is so important, guys. Remind yourself of the truth that God is with you. Remind others in your life that God is with you. Reach out to your small group leader and other adults and ask them to speak truth into your life and remind you that even and especially when you have no idea what to do, God is with you. And when we actually practice to do these things in a cycle of being real and reminding ourselves of God's presence in our lives, that is when we move from that boat of looking at everything going around and being so confused and wondering where God even is, to the other boat of being able to see everything that's going on, being real, being honest with ourselves, and then also being able to see God at work in the midst of it all. I want you to get to that boat. I want to be in that boat with you. Because when you get to that boat, it will give you hope when things feel hopeless. And it is so easy to give into the belief that things are hopeless right now. But I promise you, it is so much better when we choose to hold on to the hope that comes from knowing that God is with us. Because when we do that, we have something that this world doesn't have. We have what Joseph had. We have someone else walking with us when we don't know what to do. We have someone else when we feel alone. And when there's nothing that we can do, God is with us. God is with you. It's not some Pinterest cliche. It's truth. And my prayer for you guys is that in the midst of everything going on right now, you can trust that and you can place your hope in that God is always with you.